Do you still believe that a massive hook guarantees a massive fish? What if I told you that the giant piece of steel you are tying on right now is the exact reason your cooler is completely empty? Welcome back to the channel. Today we are tackling a topic that drives almost every angler completely crazy during the colder months. We are talking about those days when the water is freezing, your fingers are numb, and the fish just seem to be playing with your bait instead of eating it. You feel a tiny tap, you set the hook with everything you have got, and you reel in absolutely nothing. It is frustrating, right? Well, I am going to make a promise to you right now. By the end of this video, you will discover the uncomfortable truth about why you are missing those cold water bites. It is a simple mistake that 99% of guys make, mostly because they refuse to break the old habits they learned decades ago. Tell me in the comments right now before we start, do you change your hook size when the temperature drops, or do you stubbornly stick to what worked in July? Let us set the scene and understand why this happens. For generations, fishermen have lived by a very simple, almost sacred rule. Big bait equals big fish, and big bait requires a big, heavy hook. It makes sense on paper, right? Our grandfathers taught us that if you use a tiny hook, a monster fish will either swallow it deep or bend it completely straight. So we all got used to throwing heavy gear. But here is the problem that most guys completely ignore. When the water gets cold, the entire underwater world changes dramatically. The metabolism of a fish slows down to an absolute crawl. They do not chase down prey aggressively like they do in the middle of the summer. They become extremely sluggish, saving every single ounce of their energy. The rules of the game change entirely, but anglers refuse to change their gear. We sit out there freezing, casting the exact same oversized summer rigs into icy water, and then we complain that the fish simply are not biting today. The truth is, they are biting. You just do not realize that your tackle is actively preventing them from getting hooked. Picture this exact scenario. It is early morning, the sun is barely coming up, and there is a thick layer of frost on the grass. You get to your favorite spot, your breath is turning to vapor in the cold air, and you start setting up your rod. Because you want to catch a trophy, you grab a massive hook out of your tackle box, thread on a huge piece of bait, and cast it out into the icy water. You sit back, pour a cup of hot coffee, and wait for that rod tip to bend in half. But it does not happen. You wait 1 hour, then 2 hours, and nothing changes. The mistake began the exact second you reached for that huge hook. You are fishing for a creature whose body temperature matches the freezing water around it. By forcing a giant piece of metal into that environment, you are playing a losing game from the very first cast. To understand why your big hook is failing, we need to look at the basic biology of a fish in cold water. In the middle of July, a fish is a highly tuned, aggressive eating machine. It will flare its gills, open its mouth wide, and inhale your bait along with half a gallon of water. But in December or February, that same fish is essentially in a state of slow motion. Its heart rate drops, it does not open its mouth wide anymore. When it finds food, it does not strike. It simply swims up and gives it a very lazy, tentative sip. It is barely opening its lips. When you have a giant hook sitting in that bait, the fish physically cannot get it inside its mouth. It just bumps against the hard metal and slowly swims away. We need to completely destroy the granddaddy of all fishing myths right now. The old saying goes that if you use a small hook, the fish will swallow it all the way down to its stomach, and you will not be able to get it out. This was true 50 years ago when hooks were poorly designed and people fished with thick rope. But in freezing water, the bite is so incredibly soft and slow that the fish is not swallowing anything quickly. They are tasting the bait first. They hold it right at the very edge of their lips, trying to decide if it is real food or not. A large hook feels unnatural immediately. They detect the hard, cold steel against their sensitive mouths and spit it out before you even know they were there. Let us visualize what is actually happening down there under the surface. Your bait is sitting on the bottom in 10 feet of freezing water. A nice fish slowly drifts over to investigate. It does not attack. It gently nudges the bait with its nose. Then it tries to suck the bait in just a fraction of an inch. But your hook is so heavy and so bulky that the bait does not move naturally into the fish's mouth. The weight of that thick wire acts like a heavy anchor. The fish feels the completely unnatural resistance. In the wild, a dying minnow or a frozen worm does not weigh 3 ounces and feel rigid. The fish instantly knows something is wrong, drops the bait, and you are left sitting on the bank wondering why your rod tip just stopped moving. It is extremely important to understand that size is only one half of the problem. The other half is the actual physical weight of the metal. Thick wire hooks are designed to haul monsters out of heavy weeds in the summer. But that thick wire carries a lot of unnecessary weight. In cold water, when a fish barely sips at the bait, that extra weight prevents the bait from flying into the fish's mouth. Imagine trying to suck a piece of food through a straw, but someone attached a heavy lead weight to the food. You would not be able to pull it up. That is exactly what you are doing to the fish. A lightweight, thin wire hook allows the bait to flutter and move naturally, entering the fish's mouth with zero resistance. We have all experienced the classic phantom bite. You are staring at your rod tip, and suddenly you see a tiny, microscopic tap. It vibrates just once. Your heart starts racing. You wait for it to pull down, but it just gives one more tiny tap. You finally lose patience, sweep the rod back to set the hook, and you reel in bare hooks or a perfectly untouched bait. You probably sit there, cursing the small bait fish for stealing your time. But here is the bitter truth. 9 times out of 10, that was not a small fish. That was a large, sluggish fish trying to eat your bait, but your giant hook got in the way. The hook was so big that the fish could only grab the very tail end of the bait. Think about how your bait looks when you rig it. Presentation is absolutely everything in cold water. If you take a delicate, slow-moving winter bait, like a small waxworm or a tiny minnow, and you shove a massive hook through it, you instantly kill all of its natural action. The bait becomes stiff, paralyzed, and deformed. It looks like a piece of plastic wrapped around a crowbar. Fish in cold water have plenty of time to inspect their food before they eat it. They will swim right up to it and stare at it. If it looks stiff and unnatural because a giant piece of metal is sticking out of its side, they will simply turn around and leave. Downsizing your hook brings your bait back to life. I know what you are thinking. You are terrified of hooking into the fish of a lifetime and watching a tiny hook bend straight out, losing the fish forever. Let me put your mind at ease. The technology of modern fishing tackle has improved drastically over the last 20 years. The high-carbon steel used in today's small hooks is incredibly strong. You do not need a giant shark hook to land a 10-pound fish anymore. As long as you play the fish correctly and do not try to rip its head off, a small size 8 or even a size 10 hook will easily hold a massive fish. The fear of bending a hook is an outdated excuse that is keeping you from getting bites in the first place. Imagine you are out on the bank on a freezing Sunday morning. You are bundled up in 3 layers of coats, you are using your reliable big heavy gear, and you have not had a bite in 4 hours. Then a local guy sets up 20 yards away from you. Within 20 minutes he pulls in a beautiful fish, then another, and another. You finally swallow your pride, walk over and ask him what his secret is. He pulls his rig out of the water and you are shocked. His hook is so tiny you can barely see it. His bait looks completely natural. He's not using magic bait, he has simply adapted to the conditions. He understood that in cold water, less is always more. This is the exact moment you realize your old habits are holding you back. Let us talk about the actual mechanics of the hook set when the water is near freezing. When you use a massive, thick hook, it requires a massive amount of physical force to drive that thick metal through the tough jaw of a fish. In the summer, the fish hits hard and helps set the hook itself, but in winter, the fish is barely holding on to the bait. If you try to deliver a massive hook set with a big hook, you will often just rip the bait right out of the fish's slightly open mouth. Because the fish is not biting down hard, the thick hook never gets a chance to penetrate. You are just forcefully pulling heavy steel past their lips. This is why wire gauge is just as important as the hook's gap size. A thin wire hook is like a surgical needle. It requires almost zero force to penetrate the skin. When a sluggish winter fish gently takes your tiny hook into its mouth, you do not need to swing your rod like a baseball bat to set the hook. A simple, firm upward sweep of the rod is more than enough to drive a thin wire hook deeply and securely into the lip. The thin wire slices through the tissue easily, ensuring that once the fish closes its mouth even slightly, it is pinned. You convert those tiny, annoying taps into actual hookups just by changing the thickness of the metal. There is also the visual aspect that we cannot ignore. Winter water is often much clearer than summer water because the algae dies off and the sediment settles to the bottom. This means the fish have incredible visibility. They can see every single flaw in your presentation. If you have a giant, shiny, thick piece of metal sticking out of a small piece of bait, it stands out like a sore thumb. It is a massive warning sign flashing right in front of their eyes. By dropping down to a micro hook, you hide the metal entirely within the bait. The fish sees a natural meal, not a dangerous trap. Camouflage is crucial when the water is crystal clear and the fish are paranoid. A lot of this comes down to the psychology of the angler, plain and simple. Let us be honest with ourselves. We all have a bit of an ego when we go fishing. We want to use heavy gear, thick lines, and big hooks because it feels manly and serious. We want to be ready for the river monster. But true fishing mastery is not about stubbornness. It is about absolute adaptation. Leaving your ego in the truck and tying on a tiny, delicate hook takes discipline. It feels wrong at first. It feels like you are fishing for minnows. But the moment you start catching huge fish on that delicate tackle, while everyone else catches nothing, your entire mindset will change forever. Another massive misconception is the excuse we make when we get those rapid, tiny nibbles. We confidently tell our fishing buddies, "Oh, it is just small nuisance fish picking at the bait." We refuse to check our gear. But in cold water conditions, large fish often act exactly like tiny nuisance fish. A massive 10-pounder will softly mouth a bait, drop it, and mouth it again. If your hook is too big, they will eventually just pull the bait right off the shank without ever getting hooked. You sit there blaming small fish while a trophy is swimming away with a free meal. A smaller hook ensures that even a gentle nibbler gets a piece of steel hidden inside the bait. Consider the natural diet of the fish during the cold months. We call it matching the hatch. In the winter, large prey items like massive frogs, huge crawfish, and large baitfish are mostly gone, dead, or buried deep in the mud. The natural forage that is left available is much smaller and moves much slower. If you throw a giant bait on a giant hook, it does not match anything currently living in that environment. By downsizing your hook, you are forced to downsize your bait. A small, subtle presentation perfectly mimics the tiny aquatic insects and small forage that fish are actually expecting to find in the middle of winter. Balance is everything when building your rig. You probably already know that you should use a lighter, thinner fishing line in the winter because the water is clear and the fish are spooky. But if you tie a massive, heavy hook onto a thin, delicate line, you completely ruin the balance of your setup. The heavy hook drags the light line down unnaturally. It creates weird tension and strange movements in the water currents. A delicate line requires a delicate hook to function properly. When you pair a light leader with a thin wire, small hook, the entire rig flows smoothly in the water, moving exactly like a completely unattached piece of food. If you are a float fisherman, this issue is even more obvious. You are staring at your brightly colored bobber out in the freezing water. You see it dip down just 1/4 of an inch, and then it stops completely. It just sits there, slightly submerged. That is the exact moment the sluggish fish sucked the bait in, but the heavy hook hit the fish's lip. The fish felt the unnatural weight, stopped moving, and is now trying to spit it out. If you had a smaller, lighter hook, the bait would have flown smoothly into the mouth, and that float would have smoothly slid right under the surface. The heavy hook literally acts as a brake pedal for your bait. It is absolutely crucial to modify your tackle box when the seasons change. Do not just carry one single box all year round. When the cold weather hits, you need to physically remove those large summer hooks from your bag so you are not tempted to use them out of habit. Build a dedicated cold water tackle box. Fill it with sizes that you previously thought were way too small. Stock up on fine wire models, ultra-sharp points, and subtle colors. When you get to the water and your fingers are freezing, you will not have to guess. You will only have the exact right tools for the job sitting right there in front of you. Now, when you do make the switch to smaller hooks, there is one very important mechanical adjustment you must make to your reel. Because you are using a thinner wire, you cannot lock your reel's drag down completely tight. If you horse a big fish in with a locked drag, yes, the thin hook might tear out of the lip. You must learn to use the drag system properly. Set it loose enough so that when a big fish makes a sudden run, the reel gives out line smoothly. Let the flexibility of the rod and the drag of the reel absorb the shock. Fight the fish with patience, not with brute force. I challenge you to try the ultimate test the next time you go out into the cold. Bring 2 identical rods. On one rod, rig up your usual large, heavy hook that you have used for years. On the other rod, tie on a micro hook, downsize your bait, and use a lighter line. Cast them both into the exact same area and just wait. I guarantee you with absolute certainty that the rod with the small hook will get 90% of the action. You will see the rod tip bend smoothly instead of just bouncing. You will finally understand that fishing in cold water is a game of millimeters and milligrams. Small changes create massive results. So let us bring it all together. Fishing in freezing conditions requires a complete shift in your mindset. When the water gets cold, fish slow down, their bites become tentative, and they simply will not tolerate the feel of heavy, bulky metal. By dropping your ego and downsizing to a smaller, thin wire hook, you allow your bait to look natural, move freely, and enter the fish's mouth with zero resistance. Here is the biggest twist of all. You will likely catch the absolute biggest fish of your entire winter season on the absolute smallest hook in your tackle box, simply because you gave them a presentation they could actually eat. I really hope this changes your approach to cold water fishing and saves you from sitting on the bank staring at a motionless rod. Thank you so much for watching. If this video helped you rethink your rig, please hit that subscribe button, drop a like, and share it with a fishing buddy who is always complaining about missing bites. Now I want to hear from you. What is the absolute smallest hook size you have ever caught a monster fish on? Let us get a debate going down in the comments, and I will see you all in the next video.